Welcome to Promote, Profit, Publish. I'm your host, Juliet Clark, and I'm really excited about today's guest. It's one of our authors, and as you've probably noticed, May and June have been big months for our authors. We have a lot of books coming out over the summer, so super excited to talk to Kevin today. But before we get started, I'm actually going to give away a program today that Kevin told me was one of the most valuable ones that he has encountered as part of this program. So I'm going to encourage you to go over to buildyourauthoravatar.com/gift. And you can get our free program to build your author avatar. That is only for a limited amount of time, so go ahead and grab it quickly. Probably will keep it free during the month of June and then close it up again. So today's guest is Kevin W. Jones. And Kevin is a native Texan who graduated from Baylor University. After graduation, he studied economics in France and remains fluent in French today. His mother actually speaks French as well. After returning from France, he began a career as a French translator for Nortel Networks, which took him to London, where he moved into public affairs role, working closely with the UK members of parliament. Kevin moved back to Dallas and began his career at Ernst Young. After progressing through the ranks in the tax practice as part of a deliberate career change decision, he realized that his passion lay in helping people do what they do best. He transformed this passion into a talent development leader role. And in this role, he attained an International Coaching Federation certification after attending the Hudson Institute of Coaching, and additionally holds an associate certified coaching credential. He also led EY's coaching lab, where various coaching hypotheses were tested. He built the expertise as he moved into the role as America's head of leadership services. In this role, he led EY's leadership service offerings developed for medium and large size organizations. These offerings included guiding clients on enhancing leadership capabilities through individual and team assignments, 360 evaluation, individual team coaching, and learning design. After retiring from Ernst Young in January 2023, Kevin found Consilium Coaching, a boutique coaching firm for leaders in the LGBT community and their allies. Kevin is married to Simon Aesthorpe. I hope I said that right, Simon. Sorry if I didn't. They have two Boston Terriers, Pippa and Birdie, and they love working in the garden and traveling. Kevin's book is coming out next week, and it's called Opening the Corporate Closet. And I'm really excited to talk to him about this book. So stay tuned for Kevin. Kevin, welcome to the show. I feel like it's only Tuesday. It's like the third or fourth time I've talked to you this week.
I know, it's the Kevin day, the Kevin and Juliet week.
There you go. There you go. So I'm excited about this. We've been getting the book ready for a while, and I've learned a lot from you. So let's jump into the book. Is called Opening the Corporate Closet. So tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, Juliet, it's been a journey of more than 30 years, but it really started to crystallize during the pandemic, when I started reflecting, like we all had more time on our hands, and I started reflecting more about my own journey in corporate America and how much things have changed for people, especially the LGBTQ plus community. But I started reflecting on my own journey and how hard it was for me as a gay man to move up in corporate America. And not because there was any overt bias or prejudice, but because there were all these little nuances and what I call microaggressions, whatever you want to call them, little things that you couldn't quite put your finger on, but you sort of suspected the reason. And so as I was having all my downtime, I started writing ideas down and observations. And those ideas and observations morphed into little short stories. And those little short stories all of a sudden turned into a book. And so I thought, well, I don't know where this is going, but I'm going to keep writing and keep writing. And suddenly I realized I've got a lot here. And also I'm learning more and more about other people's experiences in the closet in the corporate closet as well. And those started being reinforced as I became an executive coach. I got the coaching certification during the pandemic. I became an executive coach. I started coaching people who were LGBTQ plus, not exclusively, but I started hearing their stories as well. And I thought, my God, my experience pales in comparison to what many of these folks went through on their own journey as LGBTQ people going through the ranks of corporate America. And so when I heard some of the things that they were going through, it really energized me to do something with the experiences I've been taking note of. And I incorporated some of these other experiences, and lo and behold, I got a book out of it.
Yeah. Well, plus you decided on a whole different career. You've just retired from Ernst Young, which I have to tell you guys, when Kevin and I talk, sometimes he will say something and I was like, oh my God, like your accountant, like just came out in that conversation.
Accountant and Virgo.
Yes. And it's so funny because, it's tax season when we're working together and I'll say something and you'll just like spit it out like you're an accountant. I'm like, what? So,
where did that come from?
Exactly. So you did all this coaching, got your certifications, did your coaching, but you had really been doing a lot of that in corporate America already with where you had been. Talk a little bit about that, how you're not just all of a sudden during the pandemic, this, coaching person. You had been doing this for years with Ernst Young and other organizations.
Yeah. So a lot of what I did with Ernst Young, I worked with some of what I would call our medium and large corporate clients around change management and leadership development. And so the coaching was, like you said, it was sort of on an informal basis, but working with a lot of leaders in organizations to help them figure out how to manage the change, to be the change, to inspire other people as they were going through their own changes within corporate America, whether that was maybe through an acquisition or whether they were having to make some radical change in the direction for some financial reason, or life is moving on and the products they're selling, the services they're selling, they're adapting to the changing environment around them. The point with that being, all of that requires leadership from the top. You need people at all levels to be able to embrace the change, to be your change carriers, but you also need those people at the top to be the leaders for that change. And so a lot of the coaching that I was doing was helping leaders not only embrace the change, but also be the embodiment of the change itself. Now, where that comes into in terms of the connection with what I've been doing now sort of more formally since I retired is around this notion of when you are coaching people, it's like an onion. The problem defined is rarely the problem experienced. And on the surface, what I am supposed to be coaching them on is how they more effectively manage change in their organizations. What you start digging into is their own resistance to change, or what's gone on in their own lives that's causing this challenge for them instead of embracing it. So you peel off that top layer of the onion and you've got a ton of different areas that you can explore, because they're not just executives in an organization, they're humans with their own stories, with their own upbringing, with their own challenges. And so you get into this richness of exploring what's important to them, what their values and what their beliefs are. And as you do that more and more, you start to recognize that there's a lot of richness here to be able to help them not just be more effective change agents for their organization, but also to be more effective people in their personal lives as well.
Mm-hmm. That is so true. And even though we're a publishing company and we do coach a little bit, I get a lot of the same thing. And you know me, like I should be nobody's spiritual advisor. But it's funny because I do have that side of me where, I do understand with publishing and stuff that anytime, and that's sort of what you do too, anytime you are up leveling in your life, you're going to hit conflict and drama and obstacles and pushback.
Yes.
And it is, in my view, I always tell my clients, that is the universe saying, I got you back, you can do this. You're going to have to heal something first. And I feel like in that in executive coaching space, there's a lot of that going on as well.
Absolutely, Julia. That healing, that word healing is so important in coaching. It's almost, I would almost call it a phase of the coaching relationship. You identify the wound, you identify it may be minor, it may be major, it may be somewhere in between, but you have to identify it before you know what you're going to be healing. And to know what the treatment is for the healing process,
Right.
and then to take care of yourself as you're healing. And I think so often leaders, executives, people in the C-suite, the level below that, they don't practice that self-care. And I don't mean that in some sort of fluffy marshmallowy way. I mean they start work at 6 a.m. They roll over in bed when the alarm goes on. And what's the first thing they do? They check their phone and the emails that they got from Asia Pacific or Europe while they were asleep. They are on from 6 in the morning until 10 at night. And there's very little time for self-care. And so to actually help them get into that space where when we're talking about self-care, we're talking about professional, personal, mental, spiritual, physical, emotional. It's not just giving yourself a hug and giving yourself grace. It's giving yourself a better life so that you can live longer for the things that really matter.
This isn't much of a problem, is it? For those of you who are listening and can't see the video.
No, got it right here.
The cell phone that we've all become attached and addicted to. And
never far away.
Yeah, we're on 24/7. And I think that has contributed greatly because I know me, even in the evening, I'll pick up the phone and check emails. And, suddenly when I'm supposed to be going to bed, I'm at my desk answering things so that I don't want to have to do it first thing in the morning. So I think that is really wreaking havoc on our self-care, but it is the reason to plunge yourself into self-care as well, because you do need to disconnect from that. So a couple things I have learned from you. Let's dive into the first one. You said something so profound to me a couple weeks ago about LGBTQ is like the hidden bias, in the sense that when people are making derogatory remarks, if there is a Black or an Indian or somebody else in the room person, like you sit down and shut up because you don't want to be rude and make a derogatory comment, and God forbid that you probably shouldn't anyway. But with the LGBTQ community, unless somebody's out of the closet, you don't know. You just insulted somebody in a really serious way. So can you talk about that a little bit? Because I don't think most people realize that, or maybe I'm just lame and it took a while.
First of all, I'll tell you, you're not alone. A lot of people don't know that. And it starts when we're really young, depending on your family. The first circle of people who matter to you are your family. And depending on the values and the spiritual beliefs and religious beliefs and social norms of the family you grow up in, some of the first things you may hear and recognize are derogatory comments about gay people.
Yeah.
In my family, let me first say, my family has come so far since I was a little kid growing up in Southeast Texas in the 70s. But at the time, homosexuals were fair game for all sorts of derogatory comments. And you can use your imagination with the names and the slang that was used for people who are identified as LGBTQ. But the point with that is, you're absolutely right. Even as a small child, I heard from family and then from friends and friends of family and at church that it was not okay to be gay. Absolutely not okay. And the terms I heard, abomination, and I'll use faggot, that's a nicer one that I used to hear, which ironically enough, as a language geek, If you say faggot in England versus America, faggot just means a bundle of sticks. That's a topic for another time. I detour. But when people say those things, you hear it and you internalize it, especially when you're a child. You know, if they knew who the real you was, they wouldn't like you. God doesn't like you. You are sinning, and that is bad. And so the older you get, as long as you're closeted, you are fair game to hear more and more of those things. And every time you hear it, you internalize it, and it reinforces the belief that who you are is wrong and bad. And I call it the pink camouflage in the book. You can hide yourself as long as you want, and people can keep insulting people like you until you stand up to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. Texas was like that because I grew up in a small town, and the only reference I ever had was some gay school teachers that lived up the hill. And my dad said something once or twice about them, never even, like it didn't even register. However, I got my lessons. All my roommates in college at Cal Poly were from the Bay Area. First thing they did was get me up there to a gay bar. So you can imagine Juliet from this little town in Central California, and we walk into, I think it was called Hamburger Mary's. And, you know, there's this guy on the counter with leather pants, no shirt, chains in his crotch, like, you know, dancing, pouring drinks. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we are not in Kansas anymore.
Well, I can tell you this little Southeast Texas Southern Baptist boy who went to Baylor and then moved to Dallas, same kind of thing. I was so sheltered. And the first gay bar I ever went to, bear in mind, this is Dallas, was JR's.
Like J.R. Ewing? That's a gay
It wasn't. It was called JR's. It had nothing to do, but the funny thing is, next door to it was the lesbian bar Sue Ellen's.
Oh, that's so funny.
So
yeah, I'm very naive about stuff like that. We had a friend named Tom who looked exactly like Tom Cruise. After I got out of college, and we were out tooling around Hollywood, and we ended up in West Hollywood, and we just found a place, went in, and we started eating. And my friend Sandy's looking around, and she's like, "God, there's some gorgeous guys in here, and they're all looking at us." And I was in advertising at that point. I start looking around, and I'm like, "Yeah, babe, they're looking at the Tom Cruise lookalike over here, not us." And Tom wasn't gay either. He immediately got very uncomfortable. He hadn't. Talk to us a little bit about, you talk about the gay glass ceiling in the book. And, of course, being a woman, there was that, well, they still say there is one. I shattered that myth way back in the 80s. But with the gay glass ceiling, it's a little bit different than the women's in the sense that it's not always the corporate perception that you can't move up. It's your self-perception. There's almost a sabotage element that's a part of that.
Yeah, there very much is. And it's this notion that if we don't see people like us at the top tiers of corporate America, we find ourselves wondering, well, what is the likelihood of me being able to make it? And so quite often, we will self-select out of that career ladder. And I use the example in the book, in corporate America, variations on it, depending on the culture of the organization you work in. But there's always some sort of announcement when there's a leadership change. And it's a pretty formulaic email that goes out that says, Juliet is now moving into the role of market segment leader. We are so happy to have her. She replaces X person. Juliet has X number of years in this area, and she is excited to see what she can do. Then the last paragraph is almost always, Juliet is married to insert man's name. They have 2/3 children and live whatever in whatever city and state. They have been married X number of years. Nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. But what I started realizing as I was writing the book is what you almost never see is Kevin is in this role. Kevin is married to his husband, Simon, and they have been married X number of years or whatever. You rarely see people like me, gay, lesbian, bisexual, who are in these leadership roles. And so over time, every time you get one of those announcements, and you see that it's another straight person in a role of a leadership in a large organization, and you don't see someone like yourself, you start to wonder what the likelihood is of me being able to make it into a role like that. So we sabotage ourselves. Great word. We take ourselves out of the running because we don't want to be faced with the disappointment of not being able to make it on our own merit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense. And by the way, apologize to Simon if I butchered his last name in the intro. I did include that. I just want to address this because I feel like there's so much conflict right now between the LGBTQ community and the religious community. You are both. Can you speak to that?
Absolutely, I can. There are what I call the gotcha scriptures in the Bible. Whatever your faith is, there are Old Testament scriptures and there are New Testament scriptures that specifically talk about homosexuality. And what is fascinating to me is that in religion today, we can use those scriptures to demonize people who are not like us. And we often do it in such a way that those perceived sins are far, infinitely worse than anything else you could possibly imagine in the Bible. And so what happens is we take one of those scriptures and fling it at somebody who is gay and say, you're an abomination. I mean, that is a literal word in the Bible that talks about homosexuality. And what is interesting to me is when you dig deeper, this is a topic for another time, but I'll just summarize it. Every one of those, I think it's 5 scriptures, every one of those is in the context of the society that was being talked about. And so I use the example of Sodom and Gomorrah because it's one of the most famous examples in the Bible. Even if you're not religious, most people know about Sodom and Gomorrah. And what is referred to in Sodom and Gomorrah is not actually homosexuality itself, but it is the rape of people. It is sexual violence versus homosexuality. And we look at this and we know this because it wasn't that it was simply men raping men, but when you look at that story itself, but the main character, he actually offered up his daughters to the people of Sodom and said, here, take them and save us and leave us alone. So it was all about violence and rape. They were willing to rape the women just as much as they were willing to rape the men. So it was about sexual dominance. The reason I bring that up, to come back to your point, every one of those scriptures has a context of the society and the culture in which it was written. And for us to use those scriptures to judge people and to hold them accountable to a higher standard than they hold themselves, because all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. I hate to use the word hypocritical because we all have our shortcomings, but it's easier to look at the sins of others or the perceived sins of others to look at our own. And so my own spiritual journey from Southern Baptist to Episcopalian is all about the grace. And I'm very unapologetic about this. It's the grace of Christ versus the laws that we're held to. It's why Christ came, in my view. And it's why I hold so dearly to my spiritual and religious beliefs, because as a Christian, that's what I believe.
Interesting. So I was raised Baptist, but not for godly reasons. It was so we could go to church with grandma on Sunday and my parents could have sex. So, once you become aware of that. However, I am religious in a different sense. I am a Christian, but it's just kind of funny. I mean, that we know that. And the best moment of my life was when my sister actually approached my parents as an adult when they said, well, you went to church. And she turned around and said, well, yes, but we also know that it was so you guys could What? Oh. So, okay. So now you can see where my messed up family
That is great.
and why I am so probably messed up. So I'm going to move into another area here because Kevin's book is coming out on June 6th. Super excited about it. Going to have a lot of launch stuff around it. But Kevin and I are launching something sooner than that.
Yay!
So Kevin, as part of this show, I gave away today the Build Your Author Avatar. I gifted that out to people because you told me, you actually surprised me last week when you said, I'm so surprised to hear this. And we were talking about the mass shooting in Tennessee, and you were actually looking at both media, which we both know are propaganda, both of them. But tell us a little bit about that and what you learned from that program, because I felt so good about it. I had to brag about it. No.
So it may surprise no one on this podcast, Juliet, to hear that I'm a lefty. And
right.
I listen to NPR, I listen to CNN, anyway, keep counting, I listen to all of that. And Juliet, in this, I swear this content is the most amazing thing. It was so eye-opening. Juliet said pretty clearly, you need to listen to other points of view. And I thought about that, and I thought, what does that mean? Do I have to listen to Fox? And Juliet she said, look, I'm not telling you what to listen to. Go out there and listen to other points of view, because it's important to understand more broadly what's going on instead of just being in an echo chamber that reinforces what you already believe. And so, and as part of this Build Your Own Avatar, I was thinking about it, and I thought, I'm going to take the plunge. I started watching Fox. I actually, speaking of the phone, I downloaded the Fox app, the Fox News app.
My God.
On my phone. And God help me, I listened to Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham, and Sean Hannity.
I'm not a big Sean Hannity fan. I have to tell you that, Tucker, yes.
Now I'm balancing that out with my old favorites, Tucker Carlson. See, listen to that. It's already coming out so clearly and so easily. But I'm balancing that already with my Don Lemons and my people on the left. But the point with that is, to the point you were making, Juliet, you hear a very different point of view. And it's not that I agree with it all the time, but it has opened my mind to the way different people think about the same situation, the same piece of news. And if we're only ever listening to that perspective that we already agree with, we're not only missing out on part of the story, but we're missing out on how a big chunk of America thinks. And that's what was important to me, that I did not appreciate when you told me to do this, or when you recommended that I do this, is that I have now been exposed. And again, it is not about whether I agree or disagree. It is simply the fact that not everybody thinks the same way. And now I see how other people think in a way that I didn't before I did the Build Your Own Avatar.
Yeah. And part of that, you guys, you're like, I know everybody's out there like, oh, she gave me this free thing, and now I'm not going to download it because I don't want to watch Tucker Carlson or, whoever your choice is. But here's the deal. We were noticing last summer, before we put this program out, we had an LGBT, a lesbian, write a feminist book. She worked with our media person, Jackie Jordan, and she turned down several gigs that were offered to her to come on air. Fox, Newsmax, OANN. She thought that her book on feminism was only attractive to her own tribe. And yet, here we had offers from these other conservative sides saying, we'd like to hear about that. We'd like to hear about that pay gap. We'd like to hear about, your views on abortion. We'd like to hear this. And so it really popped into my mind that we need to investigate this, because as authors, we don't want only half of America or half of anything to read our book. We want our books to be sort of not a universally, because that's like everybody, my book's for everybody, but we want other people to be interested, and we want you to go investigate what segments of that market are open to your message. Because if you're an author that's out there trying to create impact and you just shut down the conversation on your own book, you're not doing yourself a service.
Julia, I couldn't agree more on that. And the one point I would add on that is, I think of the word accessible. I want my book to be accessible, not just to the LGBTQ community, but anyone who considers themselves allies, anyone who's straight and wants to understand more what the challenges are. And I can't do that if I am only focusing on people who are exactly like me. And so that's what's important to me, is to have my voice out there to the broadest group possible, because this book is for everybody who has an interest in the LGBTQ population, or an interest in supporting them or understanding more about them.
Exactly. And unfortunately, with the propaganda on both channels, and you and I saw it we are actually pre-interviewing or pre-recording this interview. We saw it with the way that coverage was of the mass murder in the elementary school in Nashville, the way, one side was spinning it one way, other news networks were spinning another. And really, it was just, I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but most people were in the middle, which brings me to Kevin and I are actually starting a new show. It should be up by the time this plays on May 30th. We're hoping to have it up the beginning of May. And through working with Kevin, and seeing that, he's this gay, white, NPR loving guy that I should absolutely hate. If I listen
Likewise, Juliet.
If I listen to the propaganda, I should absolutely hate. I should never have discourse with. I should just hang with my own people. Kevin and I have realized that we have this place where we agree on most of the issues. We have disagreements in other areas, but we put this show called America in the Middle together to bring people together, to understand that, there's a 10% fringe on the left, there's a 10% fringe on the right. But for the most part, we all agree on the issues that the media is telling each other we should hate each other for.
Exactly.
So go ahead, take your shots at me, dude. Take your shots.
I'm getting my ammo ready. Oh,
okay.
Wait a minute. I'm against guns. Wait a minute.
Oh, that's right.
Okay.
You're against guns. You know what? I'm enough for both of us, so don't worry about it.
Great. Well, no, I'm going to come take them.
Oh, well, maybe my first opportunity to shoot someone then. For a minute, I got into an argument on Facebook many years ago with a guy who told me that we shouldn't have guns. Guns were bad. And I had to point out that as a single woman who lives alone, and I'm not going to tell you where I live because all you nuts will come to my house. If I'm in a situation where it's me and home invaders, me in a 9mm just shooting rounds, I'm probably not going to win. If I can stand at the top of my staircase with an automatic shotgun and an AR-15, my chances just became exponentially better that I'm going to live through this. So I am very pro-gun. I think most of the people out there are law-abiding citizens who have it for protection. They would never purposely shoot or use it for a violent act unless they were forced. Anyway, go ahead, take my gun away.
No, I will reveal a little secret about me, a little teaser for the show as well. I have my concealed handgun license. So,
ooh, I do too, but I don't need one in Utah anymore. I can open carry.
I'm in Texas. All bets are off.
There you go. So if you see me walking around town with my automatic shotgun, say hello. No, I'm just kidding. I don't open carry here. But
Juliet, pack and heat.
the whole thing we wanted to announce here, and we hope you guys will tune in. It's called America in the Middle, #M, America. We left the A off because that's what Middle America does for all you lefties out there who are listening on the left coast. But join in because, even if you're a coastal lefty, we think you'll enjoy it because there are so many places that we do agree. And let's start focusing on the positive instead of the negative. So we're going to be over on YouTube. YouTube's going to be sketchy because Juliet has a big mouth and chances are we will get censored or shadow banned. We'll also be on rumble.com where, it's an anything goes and they will not censor Kevin for, I'm sure NPR is one of their censorship words. No, I'm just kidding. But no, they don't censor over there. So we will have a couple different venues that you can find us at and hopefully follow us and join in, amicable discourse and actual conversation, because we do need more conversation in America.
We absolutely do, Juliet. Absolutely do. Come join us. Let us know what you think.
Okay, you have to speak because otherwise they're going to think it's the me show.
The Kevin and Juliet America in the Middle show. There
you go. So hopefully coming up soon. So Kevin, your book's coming out June 6th. Do you have something you'd like to give our audience today as a little teaser before the book? I believe you have something you wanted to give away.
Yeah, thank you, Juliet, for mentioning that. Yes, I have a quiz, and I would love for y'all, Texas, I would love for y'all to go out there and look at the quiz, take it, and I'd love to see the results, and I'd love to connect with you. It's courtclosetquiz.com. So name of the book, Opening the Corporate Closet. The quiz is simply courtclosetquiz.com. Follow the link and go out there and take the quiz.
All right. Well, thank you, Kevin. I'm sure we'll be hearing from you again.
Thank you, Juliet. So great being here today. I appreciate you letting me come on and talk about the book and talk about our new venture together.